Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I started the recording, so we're off to a good start. Let's see status updates. Does anybody have any status updates relevant to this sub-team? Doesn't sound like it. As a minor note, I was looking through some issues this morning. There was an issue for adding a search capability to our docs website. And I believe David had mentioned a service that Bootstrap and a whole bunch of other open source projects use. So I went ahead and made the request. Apparently it might take them some time to get back to us whether or not it's suitable, I guess. But hopefully that works out and we don't have to actually implement too much there, just import a JavaScript thing. So yeah, we'll keep a lookout for that. Okay, user research. Do we have a status update there?
I don't think there's more to share from last week. I know Sam is looking to get some feedback on the scenarios that were proposed for the user kind of user test of some Buildpack capabilities. And I think in speaking to him, it's been a little difficult to identify a scenario that's going to be instructive, useful for us, but also kind of compelling for the person, doing the exercise. So I think at some point in one of the working groups, he's planning to circulate and get feedback on the various ideas that have been proposed.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. That was going to be my follow-up of how exactly do we interact? Because the last thing I saw from him in the user research channel was some data based on some of the interviews that happened.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess we'll look forward to that. Let's see. Next item is unlabeled issues. As I made mention, I looked at these earlier. We don't have anything new here, so we could consider that completed. And we had a future topic of tagging issues. It didn't have a name associated to that. Does anybody know what that's about?
Yeah, I put that there following our discussion last week. Danielle and I were, I think the idea was to tag, we already have some, but like to go through and tag some of the issues as good first issues so that other people could contribute to our docs more easily. And I don't know if there's anything else, any other ideas regarding tagging that we had.
Yeah. So we're talking about specifically just the good first issues. Is that right?
Yeah, we there was a couple issues that just seemed a little less writing than some others. So we figured it would be good to tag them as good first issues.
Interesting. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I wonder if that ties into the topic I added for today, which is work for like mentoring programs. I know there was the Linux Foundation program. I forgot what the name of the program was, but basically we could get some assistance, some hands. And one of the things I thought of, like, especially like this search functionality, right? If we didn't use this service, implementing a search functionality seems like a very, capable set of requirements that we could kind of hand off to somebody and get them to do. I know that there's the Google Summer of Code, and then there's a Google Summer of Docs, or maybe Season of Docs, sorry, where there's like tech writers that also come in here. And so I'm not entirely sure exactly how this would happen, but I am basically kind of bringing up the question of maybe we should formulate some issues, or at least maybe get somebody to volunteer to work on some work items that could kind of be thrown out to these programs. We don't necessarily have to do the work ourselves.
It's interesting. Like, as you mentioned, the task that you mentioned in terms of implementing a search functionality probably isn't something that a tech writer would do. But how would we have like what it's interesting. It would be interesting to see what requirements they have for projects for that. Just because I assume like you probably don't want to have just one issue that they're going to work on. I don't know.
Yeah, so typically I think the programs, the way they work is that there's a certain amount of hours, right? So you're trying to find enough work for them to fulfill that time span. So you're kind of doing a very like almost precise estimate on how long things should take and get done. So yeah, I don't think it would be one issue, but it could be a set of issues, right? Think of maybe an epic of documenting for a very specific persona, right? And we could add a whole bunch of stuff associated to that, depending on how many hours we expect that to take. But yeah, like, again, this is just me throwing information out there of a potential, not so much saying that at least I'm volunteering, right? But if someone wants to volunteer for something like that, I think it'd be great.
So we would have to like bring this person up to speed on our project, right? Before they are able to write docs, right?
I don't know. I mean, that is the interesting, like we haven't done it, at least I haven't. I don't know if anybody else has, to know exactly what the process there is, right? Is it like, hey, just throw, again, issues together and be like, here, go figure it out, right? And then they just like ask people within the community, just like I would assume Sam did, right, to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it more hand holding, right? And then what is the value if we have to essentially do all the work up front and then they just maybe make it pretty? So that's the tech writing thing, right? Which again, once these events start happening, or at least deadlines start happening, maybe we'll just throw them here or throw them somewhere so that we, again, try to take advantage of them if we feel like they're valuable. The other ones, the Google Summer of Code and the Linux Foundation, those are more technical, right? So again, if we wanted to add functionality to our website, I think those are very suitable for that. Cool. All right. If there's nothing else there, we can go on to the next topic of documenting fundamentals, layers, etc.
Yeah, I put this on here. This is actually something that was on my mind about a week ago. And then we had, I don't know if you saw, but we had an article on Buildpacks go to the front page Packer News. I think it got up to 3 or 4. And I made the mistake of like responding to comments in there and having people tell me that I don't understand Buildpacks or Docker. Like, not even kidding. But one of the things that stood out to me, and it was already on my mind, was that, like, and I forget, people still fundamentally don't understand anything, any of this stuff, right? Like Docker, layers, and like they'll equate updates of rebuilding a Docker image with rebasing and die on that hill and all that. So when I've tried to like reply to those kinds of thoughts, and not, you know, it's not always hostile, like on Hacker News. Sometimes it's just like, so how does Buildpacks create layers? You know, I think that was actually the question in Slack. I didn't really have like I couldn't find anything to link to other than like, here's the full spec. And it's in there, right? Like if you look at the Buildpack author guide, building an app page, there it creates a layer for the Ruby runtime, but we never say like, here's how you create a layer. A layer is a directory and all that kind of stuff. So I actually tried to rework that page. But it just got me thinking about, you know, trying to have that like beginner's mind and not forget, even though we need to explain some really complicated stuff, try to keep the people in mind that just don't understand this stuff at all. So it was just something I wanted to highlight, and I have that PR, and I think it needs some tests fixed, but yep.
So maybe to just have the conversation, like, is there a very specific persona that we have in mind? Because I guess part of it to
Yeah,
me
there's
sounds like
two.
a deep dive, right? Like knowing how Buildpacks constructs layers seems like a deep dive, not so much like a beginner's guide.
Yeah, so no, you're right. The guy that asked in, or I should say the person that asked in Slack was creating a build pack, and I'd have to go back and see. I think they had a legit case. They actually, what they wanted to do, I think, would have been perfect for inline build packs. But regardless, they wanted to create a simple build pack that, you know, they would tack on to the end of the group and do something. And they didn't understand how to create a layer, right? It was very simple. Like step one of creating a build pack is like, I want to put this thing in a layer. And so like I linked them to the build app, and I don't know if the person figured it out or not, but you know, there wasn't a good like anchor link for creating a layer. So that's the like, I'm the very beginner build pack author. Now, the other ones I saw like yesterday with the Hacker News thread was definitely more like people evaluating build packs for their own use. And I even got like, these are not all just like Hacker News nerds. Like I definitely got some questions via email from people that were legitimately interested in using build packs. And so they're build pack users. They kind of think they get Docker file, but like, you know, they kept asking about Docker's limitation of having the layers being linear. And it's like, no, that is a Docker file limitation. And so those kinds of things, like the question that person asked me was, you know, can you point me to something that maps the build packs concepts to the Docker concepts or something like that, right? And so I sent them actually, I think our KubeCon talks from 2019, the one I did with Steven and then the one I think Terrence did with Emily, cover that pretty well, but we don't have like a blog or
A page or
doc
something,
that,
yeah.
right, yeah. So
that would be an
so yeah,
interesting blog
we also
post.
don't post our slides, I think,
yeah,
which is another, it's an open issue on the docs.
yeah, that's right. We were supposed to create this like repo or whatever of presentation materials. But yeah, so I guess like to your question, Javier, like these are very, very beginner entry level folks, but it's like, because they're trying to evaluate it, we kind of have to explain these more complicated things to like demonstrate the benefits beyond just I think for some people it's like pack build, wow, that worked great. But then other people are like, I have this Docker file and it works, why would I switch? And to explain that, you have to be like, well, what if you have 1,000 Docker files? And you know, that kind of stuff. So it's just something, you know, we don't have to like do anything today to fix anything. It's just as we're like, I'm certainly going to be thinking about this as I write more blogs and docs and stuff. But yeah.
We have a essentially like a reference article where someone essentially tries to migrate a Docker file over to a build pack, right? Where like the concepts
That
are
sounds
mapped.
familiar.
I feel like that should be not so much trivial, but like the first experience, right? It's like, oh, I had this Docker file and I wanted to create a build pack compatible image out of it, right? And so I did this instead. If we don't have that, maybe
that
that sounds like a
exists?
really good
Yeah,
really good blog article, right? To kind of get past that first mindset.
I would volunteer to write that unless somebody else wants to, because I think that's a great idea. Just here's a Docker file. I'm even take one from like a legit real project and just write a build pack from it. Just write a build pack from it. I mean, it depends. I mean, there are plenty where it's like, there are plenty where it's so trivial that it's like, this isn't actually a good example because, you know, it just doesn't demonstrate it well or something. But
right. Cool. Yeah, I mean, if there's no other volunteers, feel free, Joe. We're idea generators.
I mean, Yeah, I'm such a bad. I think the word is diminisher. Like by volunteering now, nobody else is gonna do it. But I'll be busy with the registry at least for another week. So if anybody's interested, have at it.
So that actually sounds like maybe the perfect setup for one of our user tests, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. I can take a look at that.
Yeah. Should we
But
just bring that up with? Are you gonna bring it up with Sam? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. I mean, if anyone has, like, if you had come across a Docker file, you're like, this seems like it would be perfect. That would be
I
great.
feel like
Yeah.
I want to like maybe point or think about like Java, because I feel like that's a pretty big ecosystem. I don't know, again, maybe to just point exactly whether or not it'd be the best case, but like a Spring Clinic app or something, whether or not that would translate nicely to a CNB project.
So I mean, I know I'm kind of like taking this, there's two, right? There's like two ways we can go with this. One is for the purposes of our interview, and the others for our docs. And so maybe we do something different, depending on which way we're going. But the only thing that we kind of want to keep in mind for the interview is that we don't necessarily know what background the person we're interviewing is going to have. And so it should be ideally something that's accessible to, someone who maybe doesn't use this particular technology.
We may want to have in that case like a few backups of languages, although that would make more work, meaning, I don't know, Java, Python, Go. I don't know what the most, or whatever most popular languages are. Probably Node, Angular.
Yeah. I mean, I think at least, is there like a baseline where they have to at least have some container knowledge, like Docker file knowledge?
I think so. I can go back and look at the people. It's like people from the first round who demonstrated enough familiarity with the technology.
Yeah, so I just posted a link to a Docker file from the Spring Pet Clinic. You could look at that and see whether or not that works. But yeah, I think Node would be another pretty common one, a Node app. All right.
It's an interesting one because it's multi-stage.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's multi-stage, so that makes it kind of gross. And then I think,
yeah, it makes it gross. Yeah, it could be a good candidate for that reason too.
yeah, and then the from, right? I think the way I think about that, like the from OpenJDK 11 JRE, how that translates over to stacks might be a good way to explain how stacks work and why they are rebasable and updated. I don't know.
Yeah,
what
I can
detail.
I can also link to the mystery meat thing that I talk about in my talk, where that particular image has contained an invalid version of the JDK in the past. So like, it's nice that it's free, but I wouldn't trust it in prod.
Right. Anything else on that topic?
We made it front page of Hacker News. Congrats. It wasn't our content, but
yeah, not from us.
Even better. The way I see it, that's
better.
Yeah, that's way better. We get all the credit. No, I'm just kidding. All right. If there's nothing else, then I hope everybody has a good week. See you all online.